Hello, everyone. This is the Engineering Politics Podcast. Today I'm going to go over my most controversial piece so far, and I think that controversy has more to do with the title of the piece than the actual message. The title of this piece and this podcast is Why Boys Shouldn't Cry. Let me just say at the beginning, I am not advocating for any parent to shut down the emotional behavior of their son. This isn't healthy and will lead to worse outcomes. My objective here is to simply explain why such behavior became so prevalent and what utility it serves today. Times have changed, and I'm not saying we must not change with it, but we must be aware of where we are headed to during this time of change. I will explain my thoughts on this topic in this podcast. I also want to make you aware of some new and exciting opportunities for this podcast and the engineering politics community. Something I hope you'll be a part of if you aren't already. But I will save that towards the end of the show. That's it for now. Let's get the show started. You're listening to the Engineering Politics Podcast. Should boys cry, or should they push their emotions deep down as long as they can? Maybe this is an outdated way of thinking. I mean, this isn't the 1950s anymore. It is time for boys and men to feel free to show and express their emotions, because there is no reason, other than archaic thinking, that should restrict 50% of the population from feeling. This seems like progress to me. But is it always good practice to view the side that stands against progress, to thoroughly think through any argument? Let's take this time to be a little skeptical of progress, and then come back and answer these questions. It is hard to argue against progress because we've all heard how great it can be. Of course, we want to become more civilized and build better societies, but is that what progress is? Many would agree that is indeed progress, but not all progress is a good thing. The word progress means to move forward toward a goal. There is no inherent good in moving forward toward a goal because that goal is not always good. We can progress to a more inclusive society, but what is that including? We can include some bad things like criminal behavior. Most will agree we don't want to progress in that direction. This contradiction, if you agree not all progress is good, is at the center of the criticisms on progressivism. A progressive must progress no matter what. The opposite of progressive is conservative. And as one of the most famous conservatives of all time, William F. Buckley, explains, a conservative is someone who stands athwart history yelling stop at a time when no one is inclined to do so or have much patience for those who so urge it. There is also no inherent good to conserve all things because there are bad things that can stay past their due. I compare progressivism and conservatism not to create a political divide, but to best categorize these positions on each side of this argument and create a contrast. The progressive side of this argument is summed up quite accurately at the beginning of this podcast. Men and boys used to hold in their emotions, which can lead to psychological harm later in their lives. They should not hold back what they are feeling because that will provide them no outlet for emotional stress. All these points are supported by most psychologists when the repression of emotion leads to an emotional breakdown. The conservative side of this argument is assumed to conserve the status quo. Hold back your feelings, and when you get to the breaking point, man up and get over it. Men are built for physical parts of life, not emotional. Why change now? This, of course, is a bit of a straw man argument. A conservative, in the image of conservatives like William F. Buckley, do not believe a man must repress his emotions. I mean, Mr. Buckley sure didn't. In fact, it is encouraged to show emotion when the time calls for it. The repression of emotion is a situational tactic. When a situation arises in which it is advantageous to not show emotion, a man should feel the duty to not show what he is feeling, because that emotion will compromise some element in that situation that will end with negative consequences. This isn't easy to explain in the abstract, so let me try explaining using a specific situation. Say there is a fire in a crowded office building. All offices should have a fire escape plan for their employees, but under situations of enormous stress, plans sometimes are forgotten in the heat of the moment, no pun intended. Large amounts of stress leads to higher emotional output. We as human beings don't tend to make good decisions while emotional. This means the best chance for these office workers to make it out of the burning building without injury is to remain calm. Not everyone, if anyone, can remain calm in a situation like this. But luckily, since we are all social creatures, it does not take everyone to remain calm. It takes just one person to remind everyone what the escape plan is. This is a situation in which a person, who is most likely very stressed like everyone else, represses that emotion to act as a leader to guide everyone to safety. This is a good real-world example of how holding back emotions can be useful. But this doesn't constrain that behavior to men explicitly. A woman could very easily lead those people to safety as well. So now that some utility for emotionalist behavior has been established, why constrain this only to men and boys? To look closer at this point, possible differences between men and women must be investigated. The behavior gap between men and women has been closing in recent years. This can be seen as organic progress as a byproduct of equality between the sexes, or this can be seen as an attempt by progressives to erase differences between men and women. The most likely explanation is a combination of both assumptions. Men and women are more equal in terms of opportunities and manner in which they are treated, but there are still some significant differences in terms of behavior and interests. The latter observation is criticized heavily by progressives and therefore is seen as intolerant. Now, you might be asking yourself at this point, why is this so important or relevant to this conversation? It is relevant because the devil is always in the details. Men and women are different. That is an objective fact. The next question you should ask yourself is, why are they so different? Men are bigger, stronger, and overall more physical. Women are more nurturing, they have the ability to create life, and are more sexually selective. For some reason, the female characteristics are seen as weaknesses to the tolerant left, but that would take its own article and podcast to unpack. These characteristics, and other characteristics like them, develop over thousands of years of evolution. Emotional behavior fits in this evolutionary context. Men had to provide for their female counterparts over a vast majority of human history. This is because women were less equipped for physical conflict than men and were more vulnerable when pregnant or caring for young children. During times of conflict with other groups or tribes, these men were placed in high-stress situations where they had to hold back their emotions to lead others into battle. Now, this is not a way to dismiss emotions while fighting, but to illuminate the lack of emotion when developing and following through with a strategy during conflict. This isn't to say women were not in high-stress situations as well, but their strategies were vastly different. Women, using their more nurturing characteristics, were more likely to control their stressful situations using emotion because they were with young children more often. It would make sense that men and women evolved to deal with their stressful situations differently. Let's bring this back to the original questions at hand now that more context has been provided. Should men and boys hold back their emotions? The more progressive arguments say that they should show more emotion, and the more conservative arguments say they shouldn't. The answer is, they are both wrong in some respects, but conservatives do highlight the utility in this behavior, where progressives don't, and how it should be used today instead of abandoning it completely. Men should not repress their emotions at all times. This will lead to more psychological damage later in their lives. But there was once more utility for this behavior when high-stress situations were more frequent. This evolutionary pattern also suggests, along with other psychological studies, that men on average are more equipped to hold back emotion and perform physically and strategically in high-stress situations. This doesn't mean women aren't allowed to do the same or predestined to be emotional wrecks in times of high stress, but they are on average more predisposed to emotional response during high-stress situations. Emotional repression is a tool. This tool is not limited to men, but commonly used by men throughout history. This tool should not be turned on at all times, the same way you wouldn't leave a chainsaw running if you're not cutting down a tree. But it makes sense that it will be used even less, especially when modern times don't warrant that behavior as much. Overusing this tool is dangerous for anyone, but dismissing it across the board is dangerous too. We can build a more equitable world between the sexes, and by equitable I mean in terms of equal opportunity. But there must be something there to protect that equality. We can't avoid wars by claiming this country a war-free zone in the same way we can't prevent shootings by claiming an area as a gun-free zone. There must be protectors of rules and law if there will be a free and equal society. And these protectors are disproportionately men. They are men because the prospect of engaging in physical conflict warrants men for their physical abilities, and these physical abilities alone will not win the day. They are accompanied by decisions that must be made with a level head and a steady hand. We all love equality until the boat starts sinking and we ask for all the women and children to get on the lifeboats first. This is instinct. It is a fight or flight instinct inherent in all of us. Strong men, good men, protect the vulnerable and fight when called upon. So, should boys cry? No, because boys become men, and men should be prepared to act as a leader and a rock when no one else can. That concludes this podcast on the expected behavior of men. And as I said in the introduction, I'm going to let you in on a few new exciting opportunities. One of these opportunities comes in the form of expanding the reach of engineering politics onto different social media platforms. One of these platforms is ThinkSpot. ThinkSpot is a new platform surrounded around healthy discourse, diversity of thought, and challenging ideological assumptions, which makes sense considering one of the creators of ThinkSpot is Jordan Peterson. ThinkSpot is different than other platforms like Twitter and Facebook because the tools within ThinkSpot are optimized to promote healthy discourse instead of shutting it down. An example of this is something like the traditional like button that has been replaced with several quick options to share constructive praise or criticisms. ThinkSpot, as of today, is currently in a closed beta testing process. You can sign up to join the closed beta, but I will make sure to let you know when the full version is released. Another social media platform featuring engineering politics is the Rubin Report community. The Rubin Report, created and hosted by Dave Rubin, is a subscription-based community. This separates this platform from the others because trolls and bots are not willing to pay a subscription fee, no matter how small, to troll a community. Although this platform is filled with content created by the Rubin Report, there is another element to what Dave is trying to create. This element is called Locals. Locals is a subscription-based community solution that gives power to the creators, not the platforms. This means any content creator, and by creators I mean podcasts, articles, books, art, clothing, non-binary, action figures, you get what I mean. But any creator can start a Locals community and produce content for their audience. Supporters of that community can consume free content or pay a subscription fee to consume limited subscriber content. Now, this isn't a new idea, paying someone to get their special content, but no other platform builds this type of relationship between a creator and his or her supporters. And of course, engineering politics is part of this community and has its own community. Actually, one of the first communities ever created on Locals. So, this is me asking if you enjoy this content, whether in this podcast format or on the website. Please join the Engineering Politics Locals community at engineeringpolitics.locals.com. You can show your support by paying a monthly subscription fee so I can keep producing independent content. Or you can just join the community for free and get its content right away as it's released. The only way we can build a culture of independent thought, honest debate, and free speech is by building communities like these. So let's build a community together. For more on Locals community, read my new article titled Building a Community on my website on the written content page. Well, you made it to the end. Until next time, this is the Engineering Politics Podcast. None of the persons, podcasts, books, or other references other than engineering politics used in this work directly reflect my ideas and/or personal beliefs, nor should they be held accountable for anything said during this podcast. Thank you for listening.